All right, Trev, how were you encouraged working on this sermon?
I learned more about the law and its purposes, and I'd always heard that it was about God and about Him revealing His character, but I never seen it as I did now. So that was encouraging for me.
Victor?
Well, I was really encouraged by your initial prayer. I thought not only did it show great reverence and even awe of the law, like you were thanking God for how beautiful the law is, and like we don't think about that. So just from the outset, I thought that was really good in even helping us, lead us in the right mindset, that we're going to see something that's reverential. So that was encouraging to hear from the outside.
I was encouraged by, you just asked the question at one point, how do you view the law? Do you see it as burdensome? It really put that application to us. Found that to be a powerful moment, and then you said we should see it as a privilege, and then you talk about the Psalm of David, and we shouldn't see him as burdensome, which is we should love the law, which is I thought that was really encouraging to me.
Similar to that sentiment, I think it's just been really useful for me to see the law. It's like a blessing, what God gave us in the law is good and good for us. That's just something I've been thinking about and encouraged by.
Awesome.
I was encouraged and exhorted by your just note on this idea of loving God, and that how often do we think of it as just allegiance or belief, and we miss the love piece, and that's from the very beginning, is that we're to love God. So that was like encouraging to me, and that's like that's primary, and exhortative to me as like that's primary. So what was something that you feel like still needs some work coming off of this?
I found this one very difficult. I thought about it for a long time, so I thought I'd have lots of time to do it, and then I guess I don't know if it's because there's so much written about the law or whatever it was, but I found myself for the last few weeks just thinking about this and that and talking to people, and then suddenly in the last few days trying to bring it together, and it felt disjointed, and I didn't know what is the emphasis here, and I thought I might have had my main point, but I went back and forth 100 times. So anyway, in my mind the whole sort of argument was scrambled, and I found that difficult, and if it came through like that, then you know why.
Great. Victor?
Did you give us a title?
Save to obey, but maybe I didn't do it clearly.
Did I miss it?
I did.
Okay. So never mind that one. I guess I think you've been improving in this area, but I'm going to say it. At your vocal delivery,
Yeah.
it's very monotone, and
Okay.
you were saying a lot of great things and
Yeah.
true things and amazing things.
Okay.
But I feel like the tone of your voice wasn't helping, communicate that.
No, thanks, Victor. That's helpful because you probably have said it to other guys, but I forget from time to time, so it's a good reminder. I thought I sound great, but
I think just the way that you expanded the 10 Commandments in the second point, I thought it was too much.
Okay.
In one point.
Yeah.
It felt kind of burdensome.
Yeah.
Of the law.
Oh boy.
Which maybe shouldn't be, but I wanted you to, I don't know, summarize them more, or
Yeah.
tie them all together with under the main point better, or something like that. You know,
Mhm.
instead of taking each one verse by verse. I think I wanted you to put it under, tie it better to your main point, which is what you're talking about. You said
Yeah.
you struggled with that.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to follow Josh because mine is also related to how you might organize that second point. Because you did have kind of two sets of organizing ideas within your second point. And you could have introduced them earlier and then explicitly, Josh is 100% right, tied it to the main idea. Because you said there's relationship with God and relationship with others. So if you just said up front, like now we get the law, which is what we're supposed to obey. Right? We're saved to obey what? We're saved to obey and how we relate with God and relate with one another's. And then maybe you like go in and you say like, yeah, we see Bing, 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 and maybe just pick on one, right, that you're going to spend the most time on, which there was like the idols one. And you'd be like, and then you could go through and like, and not just saved to obey towards God, but saved to obey towards others. And then you go Bing, 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 and then you like sit on this, you hit on parents mostly and the coveting thing. And you say, now what I want you to see, that we're saved to obey towards God and others, but it's also, not just towards God and others, but it's in our thoughts, in our words, and our deeds. Because you spent like 30 seconds to a minute showing us like this structure inside out, but that doesn't really matter, except that you're trying to say that it covers all three of those, which you could do after you touch on that, say, we're saved to obey towards God, towards each other's, and in every aspect of life, which is why you were talking about thought, word, and deed. So if you put that early, now we just feel like we're not getting a running commentary on every verse, because you were in that for, that was about 12 to 13 minutes of your sermon was that second point, which is a dominant part. So you've got to give us some hangers. And you did it, but you did it kind of late. So I would just say, set it up with save to obey, relation to God, relationship with others. And then at the end, just shut it down and say, and that includes every aspect of our thought, words, deeds.
Okay, that's helpful.
Theo?
I think it is challenging to preach something like this. That's just got a lot of like this, do this kind of thing. I think one of the things like I would have done if I was like preaching this sermon is like I wouldn't. If I was in a series, I would have like tried to preach this whole passage and the point of this verse, and then came back later if I wanted to and do individual ones or something like that. So I don't know, like I feel like with something like this, like you don't have to explain everything in every sermon. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you had some good questions, like how do we view the law and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, like Josh and Kevin were saying about your explanation of each thing. I think it was informative, but I wanted it to be convicting. And I don't know if there's something more that could be done to press upon this is my problem, that I don't have right relationship with God or my neighbor. And you touched on some of that stuff, but I don't know. I just wanted to be more, I guess, direct somehow. I'm trying to think how I can word that better, but his conviction would be.
Yeah.
Josh?
Let's see, I'm trying to think of what wasn't said. I think Kevin kind of touched on it. the thoughts and words and deeds, you looked at that as the pattern from the beginning to the end, and then it repeats itself
Mhm.
for the second table of the law, which is cool. Like, I never thought about it that way, but then I'm kind of like, but every commandment also, we disobey them in thoughts, words, and deeds.
Right.
Every single commandment. It's not
Mhm.
just that the first ones are only thoughts and the
Mhm.
second ones are only deeds.
Mhm.
We disobey all of them in all of those ways.
Right.
Mhm.
That's just a point you could make with that it's
Mhm.
comprehensive, so.
Mhm.
Theo?
I think, you were pretty clear. I think, you did a lot of like explaining and then applying.
Mhm.
And then there were some illustrations, like when you did do illustrations,
Yeah.
they were really good, but they're very small
Mm.
and not that much. So just like there are other things you can do to teach as well. And so, just, just like, just to keep a note in the back of your mind that you're going to think if there's one thing you're doing
Mhm.
throughout your sermon, maybe try to like see if you can like do something else with another point or like in some other way. That's it.
Thanks.
I thought your transitions between point 1 and 2 and point 2 and 3 were sufficiently clear, but they were kind of boring.
Mhm.
Especially after 1. You're like, okay, now we're going to get to the heart of the text. But before we get to the heart of the text, let me just give you a word about the purpose of the law.
Right.
And it's not during salvation. And I just think you could have done it like, something like, so they've been saved. Now God gives them the law? Like, what's the significance of that order? And that's just, now you don't have to put it in as like an aside and say, so we actually see that God doesn't give his people a law before he saves them.
Mhm.
And so it's just a way to work it in and be like, they've been saved. What will they follow God's? And now we're going to get to God's law, but what will they do about it? And there's a way you could get to that, right?
Mhm.
Same thing at the response at the back end. You said, so we've seen God's salvation and the law, and now we see the response. So you could be like, so they've just heard God's word, having been saved to obey this word.
Mhm.
How will they respond to God in his presence? Let's look at their response in verses 18 through 21,
Mhm.
right? So just pose it as a question, because we're like, oh yeah, what are they going to do with all this?
Mhm.
What do they do with God's presence? And then hit it rather than just telling us. Putting a question in there can catch your
Mhm.
hearer's attention. So they were sufficiently clear, especially like third one. You recapped your first 2 and brought us into your third,
Mhm.
but you could just give it a little more pop that way.
Thank you. Yeah.
What's something you thought you did well, or maybe a change you made to your sermon, or a way you were helped when you presented this worksheet to the group?
I think Josh or someone, but I think it was Josh, mentioned last time that I had like my foot like back here and my page flipping thing was bad. So anyway, that's one thing I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to see if I can keep my feet planted. And I used a binder to sort of like do this thing.
Okay.
And anyway, so I think that worked for me. But we'll see what you guys say. So.
How about from your worksheet though? Because you presented this worksheet, right?
So yeah, and
Did you get any help from your practice group?
no.
All right, guys, time to level up next time he presents.
You know what? There was help there, but I left there probably a little bit more confused, and that's maybe one of the reasons I couldn't get a handle on this.
Okay.
But I can't blame it on the work group neither, because I had this text and I could have just kept working at it. So, but yeah.
All right.
Like, this was actually the argument I think that they said not to do.
So you ignored them.
Yeah.
Okay. Theo, you can start on the encouragements.
I think I think you did a really good job making the law appealing in how you talked about it. Like some of the illustrations you used. I thought your your date analogy could have been used for the whole thing.
Yeah.
The
fence one.
Yeah, it was really good.
Which one? The
fence, the Chesterton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but I like, and some of this is kind of personality too, and the way you preach, the way you gave the law a lot of warmth to it, that I thought was it was useful for me when I was listening to it. It made it yeah, this is a good thing. This is a blessing from the Lord. So,
Josh?
I like the emphasis on the first commandment and the comprehensiveness of it that you brought out. You really brought that out. What does loving God mean, and above all else, and how that expands throughout all the commandments. That was really good. And then, of course, that comes out easily in the gospel connection that you made, right? With Christ fulfilling that law, especially loving God. So I really like that.
I thought I saw a good use of amplification in your gospel connection, where you didn't kind of come at it by saying, well, Jesus has done it, so don't worry about it anymore. But no, on the contrary, because Jesus has died, now you're enabled to love this law and strive for obedience. There was that elevation. It took off a little bit, even emotionally, when you were saying this. There was a noticeable difference there.
Okay. I think that's because my time was running out. I was like, I gotta get going here, but yeah, it's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I thought there were a couple of good moments where you pressed in terms of application. Your clearest moment was on this coveting thing. And you had a good tone, and you didn't just say, don't covet. You were like, brothers, how are we doing with coveting? And then used a really personal example, I'm feeling priced out, and I wish I had a house and all that stuff. That was, I thought, done well, without taking too much time. And then, I don't know, I was convicted by it. Victor didn't feel convicted because he probably doesn't covet like I do. But, Theo, you got another one?
Just a good job pointing out traps you could have fallen into early. This doesn't mean that. Don't go there with it. And one thing you did that was really useful for a sermon about the law is this your title, Saved to Obey. You repeated it a couple of times and wove it through your sermon very well. So it helped avoid some of the legalistic traps you could have gotten into with this, and kept everything lined up on point. So.
Josh?
I think you made clear what both the motivation and the purpose of following the law was, all the way from the beginning. When you talked about your main point, what's our motivation behind this and the purpose of why we have to follow it. That was clear throughout.
Victor?
Yeah, I thought you had really good organization that made it easy to follow you throughout the whole thing. And it was clear, your main point, I thought it was just re-emphasized, and it was just, your organization helped with that greatly, so even for someone as distracted as I.
Yeah, the mechanics were good up front in terms of setting it up for clarity. giving us your 3 points up front, giving us your, main argument without saying, now my argument is this, right? You were a little bit more nuanced than that. So I was like, okay, like I know what I was doing. You were sufficiently like brief in your introduction, which is important because you had a lot to cover. And so I'm going to say this. I'm going to say brevity was a strength to your sermon. Even though you used your full 25, you didn't spend as much time on each of the commandments as you could have, right? Like some of them were just like murder, and you had a one-liner. Adultery, a one-liner. Stealing, one-liner. False witness, 2 lines, right? We should be truthful in all our speech, especially in court, right? And then you would like go in occasionally, like on the, you went in on oaths a little bit. You spent actually more time on the first 4, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Because you did your Chick-fil-A, you did Jesus is my homeboy. You did the Wesley quote, so you went in a little bit more. But then on the last ones, kind of like the text, those are just kind of rapid fire commands. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there was sufficient brevity that it didn't feel like you got bogged down anywhere. So,
Great, thanks.
all right, man.